Hello there, Lunar Squadron, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another Star Wars Outlaws video. If you've been in touch with the channel so far, you will know that we had a pretty extensive preview of Star Wars Outlaws where we talked about everything from starships to side missions to even Sabacc, but there are some details that we didn't quite manage to get to yet, and this is one that we've been wanting to talk about, the wanted system in Star Wars Outlaws. And on that note, there was a recent article about this point, so we think this is a great jumping in point to have this discussion right now, because there are some details here that we are legitimately concerned about at this stage, and we're going to dig into it in just a moment. But first, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you, and the way to do that is go down below this video, hit the little subscribe button, and make sure to hit the bell notification button right on next to it. It's going to let you know every single time that Nick and I upload the latest and greatest Star Wars Outlaws videos here on YouTube. That said, Nick, ready to get into this one?
Oh, definitely.
All right, let's get into this. Leading up to the Star Wars Outlaws preview event, I was really excited to finally fulfill the dream of playing a Star Wars Grand Theft Auto. And then after the event, we saw a lot of publications likening the game to Red Dead Redemption or GTA. Even from the get-go, Nick, a lot of people were comparing this game to GTA, particularly because of the wanted system that we saw in the first gameplay demonstration. And to be honest with you, in my 4 hours of playing through the game, I only interacted with the wanted system once, and that was a pretty on-the-rails interaction where I completed a story mission, and during the story mission we screwed with the Empire, broke out of an Imperial base, and of course when we left that Imperial base, the Empire was on our tail. Other than that, I chose to spend my free time on things like playing Sabacc or screwing with the Pike Syndicate, and so I personally didn't really get to experience the wanted system at all when playing through this game. And so when I left the preview event, that wasn't one of my lasting impressions from the game. But Nick, you got at least some opportunity to screw around with the Empire, and so before we dig into this article, I kind of want to hear your firsthand experience.
I did leave the preview event a little disappointed with the way the wanted system was going, at least in the preview build. I even talked to the demos we were working with and asked them if these were limitations caused by the preview build or if this would be in the final build of the game, and unfortunately they weren't sure. So what I was trying to do near the end of our preview, I completed the story missions that we were allowed to complete. I had done a bunch of side missions. I wanted to try and trigger that wanted system and just kind of see the scope of it. And one of the things that I did, and you'll see it in the gameplay, I'm sure that you'll be seeing on screen, is I was trying to go into Kijimi City and mess with the Empire. I was trying to pull out my blaster and just start blasting stormtroopers that I found on the street, and I couldn't even do that. I could not pull out my blaster in Kijimi City and do anything. I was trying to mess with civilians. I could not do it. I literally could not pull out my blaster. I was trying to, and I could not do it. You'll see me at one point, I try to just start running into stormtroopers and Imperials to see if that will trigger the wanted system, and the worst it got was just like them telling me to screw off, and then eventually I believe I get arrested. It was not very exciting. It's not the most impressive gameplay thing you will ever see in your life. It honestly was a little disappointing, and that was one thing that I was really excited about going into this game. And it is weird given the fact that, Andreas, this game is called Star Wars Outlaws, and you would think one of the way you could operate as a scoundrel or as an outlaw is to start problems like that out in the open world, at least in the cities, and that does not appear to be the case, and that was a little disappointing. That is one thing that I walked away from. And like you said, we didn't even really talk about this in our preview video for this game, because honestly, I kind of forgot about the wanted system until this article came out the other day that was like, oh yeah, there is the wanted system in this game, and oh yeah, we did try to trigger it. Now, one opportunity that I did see where I could have potentially triggered it and then brought it down into the planet environment is when I went up into orbit, there was an Imperial ship up there, and I feel like if I would have had the time to mess with it and start shooting at it and try to destroy it, of course, then I would have triggered that wanted system in the open world, brought that down to Kijimi, and then it would have played out how it would have played out. I'm not entirely sure, especially since I couldn't pull my blaster out in the city. If I brought that wanted level down to Kijimi City, would that whole mechanic change? I'm not sure. We didn't get to experience it. And then, of course, there's been some gameplay videos from some creators around where they show you how you can trigger the wanted system. And my takeaway so far is it is a lot more limiting than I was hoping or expecting it to be, and that is disappointing. So with that said, I do want to kind of jump into this article that kind of backs up some of these points. This article is from Games Radar, and it's called Star Wars Outlaws Doesn't Let You Kill or Steal from Friendly Civilians, and just like that, my hopes of GTA in space have been dashed. Andreas, are you feeling the same way? Have your hopes of a GTA Star Wars experience been dashed because of this?
Personally, Nick, I don't know if my hopes have quite been squandered at this point because, of course, I've only played the game for 4 hours and I want to actually mess with the wanted system and test its limitations. I feel like at this point, I haven't really pushed it. In fact, I haven't really touched it at all. So I personally still have some hopes, but when it comes to setting your expectations appropriately, this is an important discussion to have, because now when I go into playing the game, I'm going to set my expectations properly and assume that we don't have a full-blown GTA Star Wars experience, and I think that'll go a long way for a lot of people. I think it's important for people to set expectations appropriately, because if you are going into this game thinking it's going to be full-on Red Dead Redemption, I'm going to be able to steal other people's starships and shoot at will and start all of these bar fights in the cantina and start all this craziness, it seems like that's not going to be the case. And from my playthrough, I did experience what you were talking about, Nick, with not being able to pull out your blaster on Miragana specifically, and I was a little disappointed by that, and it was honestly a little antithetical to the entire philosophy behind the game, because we of course sat in on a couple of discussions with the developers where they told us that a theme running throughout this game is freedom, that the concept of being an outlaw is that you don't want to fit narrowly into imperial or rebellion categories. You want to be on your own in the black market, under the table, with your freedom in the galaxy. And that goes hand in hand with the whole point of this being an open world Star Wars game, that they want you to feel that freedom as a player. And it just felt awkwardly restrictive of a game that's all about freedom to not allow you to do something that we've been able to do since Lego Star Wars. I mean, in Lego Star Wars, you could have a bar fight in the cantina, but you can't do that in Star Wars Outlaws, it seems. So that, for me, is a little bit upsetting. So I guess long answer and short answer, Nick, I'm not fully disappointed, but I am pretty concerned at this stage.
Yeah, Andreas, it is a little eye-opening and concerning to hear you talk about Lego Star Wars and how you could have those bar fights and those open-world experiences like with the Empire and characters and civilians, and then it doesn't appear to be the case in this game. I definitely don't love the way that mechanic is currently set up. And then this paragraph from the article that I want to talk about here is where it says, according to Joe Raptor, there's no way to kill or even steal from friendly civilians, even though the game is named, Star Wars Outlaws. I know there's bounty hunting in the game and a reputation system that can lead to some GTA-style chases, but alas, robbing and killing innocent civilians aren't amongst the crimes you can commit and be held accountable for. That falls in line with exactly what I experienced. Again, I was trying to pull out my blaster and mess around with the civilians on Kijimi, and I just simply could not do that. And that was pretty disappointing because I was hoping for that Red Dead Redemption style thing or that GTA style gameplay where you could do that if you really wanted to. And while I am disappointed that this does appear to be the way the mechanic is made, one way I'm trying to rationalize it in my head is simply maybe this is a brand new protagonist that Lucasfilm and Massive have sat down and put together, and it is set within that time period between Empire and Return of the Jedi, and maybe they just don't want their brand new main character going around being able to kill civilians. Like, I really don't know. I really don't love this lack of freedom, and one thing that I do want to talk about based off of this paragraph where it talks about the reputation system, in my experience, Andreas, the focus of this game is about the reputation system and how the reputation system will impact gameplay, and the wanted system almost feels like an afterthought, and I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Nick, because, of course, if you will have seen our preview, my personal takeaway from playing this game for 4 hours is that I was impressed how robust the reputation system was, but I left that gameplay demonstration not even thinking about the wanted system, and now, in retrospect, seeing other creators' gameplay on it, Nick, seeing your gameplay, I am a little confused as to how I could have navigated this game for 4 hours and never really felt the full brunt of the wanted system. And sometimes that's just by virtue of how these demos are created, because if you will have seen our preview, we talked about so many different things, and this game has a lot going on. Like, there's a ton of side missions, there's a ton of these mini games, there's the story going on, the open world, the reputation system, and so sometimes a 4-hour demo, it's hard to design it in a way that shows off all of the features for the game, and that's why I'm personally reserving the full brunt of my judgment on this issue until I get my hands on the full game and actually get to feel how the wanted system works in an open loop, because I'm still concerned with things like if you interact with the Empire in space and then you go down onto a planet, that they'll follow you and keep pursuing you. But once you go into the city, like on Miragana, are you allowed to pull out your gun when the Empire is trailing you, or are you stuck without any defenses, and once the Empire catches you, like, is it like a game of tag and then all of a sudden you're wanted, or do you have an opportunity to fight back? Because I think that's just going to be awkward if you can't actually engage in a hot pursuit with the Empire, and if they just catch you and then it just says arrested all of a sudden. I feel like that's going to break the immersion for me, and I would be critical if that's the way it really is. And also, Nick, to go back on your point about why this might be the case, I simply don't find it a good explanation that they're just keeping it PG for the sake of a new Star Wars character, because I think of, like, Ben Kenobi in episode 4 when he hacks off Ponda Baba's arm, who's just like a civilian in the cantina. I think we've had interactions with NPC type characters in Star Wars before where people will pick fights with our protagonists and they fight back, and that's okay in Star Wars because these areas are wretched hives of scum and villainy. There's a little bit of that danger factor, and I want to feel that when I'm going through the cantina. I want to feel like I'm in an alive world where people are going to be messing with me, and I have the option to retaliate. I have the option to play out my scoundrel fantasy of who shot first. Was it Han or was it Greedo? I want to play that out in the cantina, and I don't know. I would feel a little hard done by if this game didn't hit that out of the park.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, because I always felt like the point of this game and of this character is to operate in that morally gray area. That's kind of the point of the outlaw. That is the point of the scoundrel. That is Han Solo's character, is this morally gray area. And it is a little disappointing to see that that might not be the case in this game. But for the sake of fairness, again, this was a preview build that we experienced. We don't know how it is going to differ from the final build of the game. For all we know, this mechanic could be robust in the final build, and it was just limited because there was limitations to this preview build, and we only experienced 4 hours of this game. And guys, that really is just not a lot of time to experience all these different gameplay mechanics, because we wanted to experience the main story. We wanted to experience the reputation system. I honestly didn't start messing around with the wanted system until like the final 10 minutes, where I was like, oh yeah, the wanted system, I want to try and mess around with that. And I was kind of scrambling and panicking to experience that. So just for the sake of fairness, I do want to kind of preface this that we don't really know until we get our hands on the game. But right now, I'm not loving the direction that it appears to be going. And one thing, if this is how the mechanic is going to be in this game, I do hope that Massive will perhaps consider a patch or an update down the road to maybe change things. We've seen that with games like Cyberpunk, where they went in and completely reworked their police and wanted system and made it the way people wanted it to be. I hope that if this is the case, Massive will entertain that idea, because I do think that will help make that game a lot better. But that is yet to be seen. Guys, let us know your thoughts down below on all of these new details about the wanted system, this article out of Games Radar about the limitations to the wanted system. Of course, I think we've expressed that we're a little worried, concerned, and disappointed with what we experienced. Are you guys disappointed by that, or do you just not really care about the wanted system? I just think it's something that Andres and I were very excited about going into this game, and we were expecting something a little different, so it's hard not to be disappointed about that. But guys, let us know your thoughts on all of that down below. Anyway, that is going to do it for us for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all next time.